The garden, Earth, on an axis, spins inside an envelope called atmosphere. The spinning stirs the atmosphere into movement, and pockets of air twisting clockwise and counterclockwise are set in motion. Wind is born. The wind blows where it wills, and the creatures of the garden cannot tell from where it comes or where it is going. Sometimes the wind is cold, and sometimes it is warm. The mist of the sea rises to meet the mist of the air. A vapor of moisture forms to randomly move with the wind about the face of the garden. Certain vapor is heavy and visible as clouds, some invisible but suspended. It is for most creatures of the garden to never know from whence the wind and vapor come. The human creature can speculate and measure, but there is only a prediction. Cold winds meet warm winds. They pass over the dry land and rise to scale the mountains. They come together with fury, and they come together with gentleness. Thus starts a never-ending quest for the elements of the vapor to return to their origin, at least to the same level as their origin. As the garden earth turns, the wind moves the mist, and it passes. All the living organisms of the garden, the plants and the creatures, depend upon vapor from the sea. It is this vapor in liquid form called water by the tiller on which all life depends. It is a process of rising as a mist to travel with the wind, then to be redeposited and move across the surface of the land and to rest in pools and lakes and soak into the earth. In the journey, the water flows between the sand, silt, and clay to be cleansed, all the while seeking the original sea level. Through this process, the water can pass by all life forms of the garden and water them as it goes. The whims of the wind carry moisture-laden air across the land, and it confronts the high country, the mountains, and it rises. As the air rises, it cools, and it can no longer hold the moisture that it absorbed at the lower, warmer altitudes, and it must lose some of it. If it is very cold, the moisture falls as snow. If warmer, it falls as rain. The water accumulates, sometimes to stay in a frozen state for long periods of time, but also to gush freely from the altitude ever downward, seeking its original level. In this quest for origin, it pauses, sometimes in pools, called lakes, to overflow and continue downward. The waters that are seeking origin are called creeks, rivers, and streams. They carve the land into shapes called gulches, gullies, canyons, ravines, valleys, and arroyos. Where the rivers level out and slow, they deposit the spoils of their carving onto an area called a floodplain. They continue on, these rivers of destiny, carving, pausing, and depositing, sometimes aggravating the tiller of the garden, especially those tillers who do not heed the rules by which rivers live. Where the land is level and the pause is great, the water sets and soaks to be cleansed by the plants of the garden. In these places, the water is used by the creatures of the garden. There is a difference. The plants of the garden tend to be cleansing agents for the water, while the creatures tend to contaminate the water. On this course, the water also soaks in to be filtered by the earth. The tiller, both male and female, has named these areas marshes, swamps, swales, and bogs, collectively called wetlands. It is these places that enrich the garden as a whole. The wetlands are one of the features of the garden for which the other features and creatures depend. The water continues this journey, seeking origin until, after much diversion, delays, change in form and passage. It finds a new mouth that empties back into the sea. It may not be the same place in the garden that it started out, but the level is the same, and after all, that is what is most important for the water. For the individual water molecule, destiny might be quite different. It may never travel far or even persist long. Its parts are what give life to plants and creatures of the garden, and it is through the giving of its parts that new life is born. Water is life-cleansing and life-giving. It is through this giving that life in the garden is sustained. Water represents a piece of the essence from the tiller's soul, who is to care for and revere the garden.